Today, we're diving into some of Java's most fundamental building blocks, the math, character, and string classes. Now, if you're prepping for a Java exam, you absolutely have to know this stuff cold. We're going to break down the exact details that pop up as tricky questions so you can walk into that test feeling confident.
So, let's just kick things off with a real-world problem. Imagine you need to figure out the area enclosed by these 4 cities, and all you have are their GPS coordinates. How would you even begin to write a program for that? It seems pretty complex, right? But the solution is built using a few simple tools, and by the end of this, you'll know exactly how to do it.
See, to solve complex problems like that, you don't need some single, giant, complicated solution. Nope. You just need a set of reliable tools, and that's exactly what we're going to do today. We're stocking your Java toolkit with the essentials for handling numbers, text, and some really core programming concepts. So here's our roadmap. First up, we'll look at Java's awesome built-in calculator, the math class. Then we're going to decode characters and this thing called Unicode. After that, we'll get into working with strings. And finally, we'll tackle a huge concept that trips up so many people, the difference between static and instance methods. Let's get to it.
All right, first tool for our kit, Java's built-in calculator. You'll know it as the math class. Think of this as your go-to powerhouse for pretty much any numerical task you can imagine.
I mean, why reinvent the wheel, right? Java's math class is basically a powerful scientific calculator that's already built right into the language. It gives you must-have constants like pi and e, plus a whole library of methods you'd otherwise have to code from scratch. It's a massive time saver.
Now let's focus on something that is a very common source of exam questions, the rounding methods. You can see we've got ceil for rounding up, floor for rounding down, and then we have rent and round. The tiny differences between these last two are absolutely critical to memorize.
Okay, let's break these down. Ceil of 2.1 rounds up to 3.0. Floor of 2.1 rounds down to 2.0. Pretty straightforward. But here is the exam tip, so listen close. Look at how 0.5 is handled. Rent of 2.5 actually returns 2.0. That's because it rounds to the nearest even integer when it's exactly halfway. Round, on the other hand, would go to 3. This is a classic exam trick. You've got to memorize this one.
And beyond rounding, the math class has other workhorse methods you'll use constantly. You've got your exponent functions, like pow for power and sqrt for square root, and then you have these super handy utilities like max, min, abs for absolute value, and of course, random calling for generating a random number.
Okay, we've got numbers handled. Let's move to our next tool and see how this all builds up. We're going to talk about handling individual characters with the char data type.
So the key idea here is Unicode. It's not just about the letters A through Z. Java uses the 16-bit system to represent characters from pretty much every language on Earth. We're talking English, Greek, Chinese, you name it. This is what makes Java a truly global language.
Now, you've probably heard of ASCII. So how does that relate? Well, it's simple. ASCII is just a smaller 7-bit piece of the much larger Unicode puzzle. It covers the basics, the English alphabet, numbers, and some common symbols. But Unicode is the whole shebang. Just think of ASCII as a local dialect and Unicode as the universal language.
This slide shows another key concept you gotta know: escape sequences. So how do you represent a character that you can't just type, like a new line or a tab? Well, you use these special backslash codes. As you can see, /n is for a new line and /t is for a tab. This is another one of those make flashcards and memorize it tables for your exams. They love to test these.
All right, from single characters, we're now moving up to handling whole sentences and words. Let's talk about the string class. This is your main toolbox for working with any kind of text.
Okay, this is a huge one. This is a fundamental concept you absolutely must understand for any Java exam. A char is a primitive type. Think of it like a simple little box that can hold just one value. A string, though, is a reference type. It's not the box itself, it's more like the address that points to a more complex object, one that holds a whole sequence of characters. And because it's an object, it comes with a bunch of powerful built-in methods we can use.
And here are some of the most common and most testable of those methods. Length tells you how many characters are in the string. Char@index lets you grab a single character from a specific spot. 2 lowercase and 2 uppercase, well, they do exactly what you think they do. And trim is super useful for cleaning up any extra white space from the beginning and end of a string.
Let's zoom in on @, because this is where beginners often get tripped up. Look at the phrase, "Welcome to Java."
The length is 15 characters, right? But the indices, the positions, they start at 0. So message.caret at 0 gives you W, and message.caret at 14 gives you that final A. Always remember, Java indexing starts at 0.
Okay, so we've seen methods for the math class, and we've seen methods for strings. This brings us to what might be the single most important core concept for your exam, the critical distinction between static and instance methods. Understanding this is absolutely non-negotiable.
First up, static methods. These belong to the class itself, not to any one specific object. You call them using the class name. Think back to our math examples. We always wrote math.random or math.pow. We never had to create a math object first. The method is tied directly to the class.
Now, instance methods are the complete opposite. They have to be called on a specific object, or an instance of a class. These methods operate on the data that's inside that specific object. Our string examples are a perfect illustration. We had that string variable called message, and we called message.length function. The length function needs to know which string it's supposed to measure.
So let's put them side by side to make it crystal clear. Static methods, you call them with the class name, like math.pow. They're like general utilities. Instance methods, you call them on a variable like message.char@. They perform an action on the specific data of that variable. See the difference in how they're written? Class name.method versus variable name.method. That's the key giveaway right there.
All right, we've covered a ton of ground. Let's distill all of this down to the absolute must-know points for any test or interview you might have. Here they are. First, know the difference between round down and rin down, especially how they handle numbers ending in 0.5. Second, burn this into your brain. Char is a primitive, string is a reference type. Third, understand how they're called. Static methods are on the class, instance methods are on an object. And finally, remember that Java's global power comes from using Unicode. If you can explain these 4 points clearly, you are in fantastic shape.
Remember that mapping problem from the very beginning? Now you have the math tools to calculate all the distances and angles, and you've got the string tools to handle the city names. So you have the tools in your toolkit. The only question left is, what will you build?